Born in New York, raised in Palo Alto.
Oh, very good. Okay, I was born in Palo Alto, so we got a lot going in common there. And then your undergraduate degree was in history from the University of Pennsylvania.
Exactly.
Your graduate degree from Hunter College, City University of New York in art history.
Yes.
And we were just talking about your thesis, which was interesting.
Yes.
You were telling me about that, which is so interesting. So do you want to, I thought I did a little research for our talk today, and I thought it would be interesting to hear you kind of give us a little background about your family and how you were interested in art from a young age.
Absolutely. So I'm in YPO, and a few years ago, I was asked to tell my story using the hero's journey. And I got to work with Rand Stegan, who has the Stegan Institute in Dallas, as my coach. And so I said, well, I'll tell the story of the Aspen Art Museum. And he said, no. That's like one piece of your journey, your story. You need to go for a walk with your dog and think about, where your story starts. So my story with art really starts in third grade when my grandmother took me to London. I was pulled out of school for about 3 weeks, and my assignment was to keep a journal. So as my grandmother and I would go to museums around the country, I would get picture postcards and put them in the journal, and I would catalog them. Artist, title, date, medium, dimension, basically the same thing that I still do today. And
good experience at 8.
Yeah, but that's really where it started. And my grandmother was a collector, and she was in real estate, and she would buy apartments and buildings and with everything in them. And she would keep what she wanted and sort through things. And like any collector, run out of space pretty quickly. So she would send things to our house. And I grew up around all of these objects. And I should say, my parents hate when I say this, but it's true. My parents really don't like art, and they were not interested. So I grew up around these objects and made up my own stories. And that was when I really learned that art can keep you company.
Oh, I love that. I think that's such a wonderful insight. I know for me, as a child, my grandmother also took me to Europe when I was 13 on a 3.5-week trip with a friend. But everyone in my family kind of liked art because my grandfather was an artist. Were there any particular art from your home collection that really interested you, or what kind of art were you surrounded by as a child?
So my grandmother collected Hudson River School painting and early American, and then also 17th century Dutch, and then also decorative art. So really everything around the house, the furniture, the rugs, the ceramics, the silver. And I do love Hudson River School painting. And you were asking me earlier about my kids, and my kids have American creative names. My son's name is Emerson, and my daughter's name is Oleana. And so she is named after Thomas Church's house on the Hudson, which is called Olana. And so my daughter, for a long time, if you ask her the genesis of her name, she says, well, I'm named after a house. And I was like, but it's more than just a house.
Right.
I mean, it's
there's
a whole
depth there.
Movement and the family history. And yes.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting, like reading about you too, how art informs our life and we make these connections. I know we were sharing that your daughter and my middle daughter, Sienna, is named after Siena, Italy, because I am an art historian as well. And I think that these experiences really show up in our lives, and our interests are kind of navigated along the way by those, those things that we're exposed to. I know you were saying you later had a house on the Hudson River.
Yes, exactly. So that's, I think everything's cyclical. And, art for me, it's, I don't know if I shared this before, but growing up, I always wanted to be a judge. And I always thought I would go to law school. And it was only after, it was in my junior year in college where I had the idea of a career in art. And I can tell you about my first job in art if you want, which was kind of a random story. But and maybe I'll actually go there.
Why don't you start with that? I love that. Let's hear about your first job in art. How did you start?
So I came home for the summer after my freshman year in college, and I had 4 months off, and I thought I should get a job. So I started to go through the phone book. Okay, this is how long ago
we had the yellow pages,
exactly,
right?
The yellow pages. And I thought, well, I'll get an idea by looking through the phone book. So I got, started with the A's, and I saw art galleries. And I thought, well, that would be a fun summer job. So I started at, the top and called every gallery and said, do you need anyone for the summer? No one needed anyone until I got to the S's, Smith Anderson Gallery, and a woman named Paula Kirkeby answered the phone. And I gave my introduction and she said, well, it depends. And I said, on what? She said, where do you go to school? I said, I go to Penn. And she said, come in and talk to me. So she hired me, fired her director 3 weeks later. And
Wow.
I was the only employee for the summer. And I knew a lot about computers because my dad is an early Silicon Valley guy. And I computerized the whole inventory. And I did my first studio visit with an artist who happened to be Sam Francis, and met his kids
Love
and
Sam
went
Francis.
surfing with them. And so that was, I mean, it was serendipitous. It wasn't intentional. And then when I went back to Penn, I got a job at the Institute of Contemporary Art and met David Sally and Mary Boone. And then by the time I was a junior, I just had this idea that maybe I could make a career in art, much to my parents' horror when I told them I was not going to law school. So that's where it goes.
I share a similar path because I was political science undergrad and I switched to art history graduate school. After I graduated undergrad, I went to Sotheby's and did a year, the graduate course in New York. And actually the first show that we saw at the Met when we were there was the Hudson River School, Asher B. Duran and Thomas Cole and Frederick Church and all the great, that was a big show at the Met then. I'm sure you remember that show.
Yeah.
In 1987. So that was, and going to New York, and that's kind of how I switched from thinking about maybe being a lawyer and going into art, but art had a much greater pull, didn't it?
Yeah. And, it's interesting because when I graduated from Penn, I spent a year in London at Christie's. And
okay.
And by
Same
that point,
thing.
I was already interested in contemporary art, but I knew that that was the only time that I could potentially learn a lot about something else. And so I specialized in 17th and 18th century French and English furniture.
Got it.
Which was very cool to learn about gilding and fakes, and to visit these craft houses around England again.
I love that history and this kind of decorative art background as well, because I think it feels, I know that I love the juxtaposition between the antiques and the contemporary art.
Yes.
And my parents, I was kind of interested in contemporary art when I went to Sotheby's. And of course, I was thrust into fine and decorative art starting in the 17th century. So it was kind of the same thing, but I was like, but I'm really interested in contemporary art. So how did that shift really, how did you solidify that you really want to go towards contemporary?
It's interesting. So people always want to know, who's your favorite artist, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that.
So, I mean, my favorite artist growing up was always Clifford Still. And now people know about Clifford Still because there's a museum in Denver, and there's been incredible auction results for the few Clifford Stills that come out of the family collection into the public. But I grew up in Palo Alto and with the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and they had, before the Clifford Still Museum, the best collection of Clifford Still. So, I as a kid was still drawn to abstraction, which is not that common, I guess. But I understood that art could communicate in ways that language can't. And I mean, I love books and I love music, and but I also know that visual art can tell stories about things that we think we know, or we might not quite know, or we haven't yet learned. And that's what I love about contemporary art is the fact that we can talk to the people that are making these objects. And that's where the turn for me was. I mean, what I love about a bowl, for example, from China in the 18th century is to think about, well, who used that and what did they put in that, and and who did they sit with, and what did they talk about when they interact with this object. But why I love contemporary art is that I can actually ask the person, what were you thinking when you made this, and who inspired you, and after you've made it and it's left your studio, what do you think about it, how has your relationship with it changed? And so that's really why I made the shift to contemporary art.
I love that. I think there's a phrase that I haven't coined it myself, but I think you'll recognize it. you know the phrase in vino veritas, right? In wine, there's truth, but I
Yes.
always say
Yeah.
in arte veritas,
Yes.
because I think that fundamentally there's this truth in art
Yes.
that comes through. And I have your books here. I've got Heidi's books I've been reading. This is so much. I'm so glad I got to do this assignment. I've been reading her books and listening to some podcasts. I love these conversations that you've had with artists because you're really talking about truth and bringing that out. And one thing that really strikes me is how you see the museum as a vehicle for bringing art to the people and letting that truth come out.
Yes.
So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking with an artist the other day for an upcoming podcast, actually, and she said, art can't lie.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so interesting, and it doesn't mean that there's only one truth, right? Like we live in a time with relative truth and people have their own truths and, but this idea that art can't lie. And so the museum is really, I like to think about it as, some people talk about it as like a safe space for unsafe ideas, right?
Right.
Or I really like this idea of being comfortable with not knowing something. And that's what life is like. And so I make the connection between art and life a lot. And the museum is a place where people can come and, rub shoulders with someone that they might not otherwise have anything in common with, So
I
regardless
agree.
of, what people believe or how they spend their weekends or, art can be this universal language. And sometimes we get it and sometimes we don't. And the other day I was trying to explain to people this idea about taste, right? Like if I love chocolate and you love vanilla, I'm never going to convince you that, chocolate's
Chocolate is
better than vanilla, but
Right.
we don't have to, we can, it's like a safe space to disagree,
Yeah.
about things that matter, but, also are okay to disagree about. And that's a great model for, how to be in the world also. Like we don't all have to think the same thing. We don't all have to agree all the time, but we can do so from a space of what we have in common, which is much more than often people think.
I really like where you're going with that because I think, like for me, I think art for the Visionaries, and a lot of my friends in the Visionaries have heard me say this. I feel like art was a little bit life-saving for me.
Yeah.
I've been around like you. I've really been around art all my life. My grandfather was an artist, but it's this ability for this transcendence in art. Yes. And a deeper level. You get that in multifaceted ways. Really, you get that from the artist shows you something and it provokes something in you and you have this reaction or whatever. And then you have their truth and what's your truth looking at it. But more than that, I think art brings us together.
Yes.
And I think for me, the Visionaries, and for you, because you're new to this wonderful group and to our greater OCMA and our community here, I love art as a unifier. And I think it's especially important as we're building this new iconic new building, and we're building our new home here. And for that, we're just, we're really grateful to have you here. So we feel blessed that we got you. You have a rich background. And so can you tell us how, when you heard about this, how did you hear about the job? How did you decide to choose us?
Yes, thank you. I really believe in serendipity. I don't believe in coincidence at all. And I think that if that's kind of a life approach, then you notice things that maybe would go unnoticed otherwise. So I've been on LinkedIn forever, but I never really used it. And then during the COVID period, I had a lot of thoughts. I was connecting with people, and a lot of people were super isolated, struggling, and I just started sharing a thought that I had every morning and then connecting it with an artwork. So I started doing that on like the 10th day of the quarantine. So every morning on LinkedIn, and I did it, I'm a very ritualistic person. I do the same 5 things every morning. So every morning I would post on LinkedIn something that I was thinking about or feeling, and then I would write about an artwork and the artist and kind of tie it in. So at some point in the summer, I think in June, Kurt Lyon reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, we have Todd has left the museum and we're going to be doing a search, and would you be interested in the job? And I didn't know Kurt well. We had Aspen in common, but one time a few years ago, we ended up being seated next to each other on an Aspen LA flight and just seatmates and had a conversation. So he knew about the museum. And so he sent me a message on LinkedIn, and I happened to be on there every day since I was doing these daily posts. And I wrote back and said, I'm not sure, but I'm going to be in Orange County next week because my daughter is an equestrian and she's showing at the Oaks in San Juan Capistrano. So can I come and do a hard hat tour? Because I love museums and I love museum architecture, and I'd be interested. So sure enough, he set up the tour and I came and sat, literally next to where you and I are sitting right now. And Kurt sat here and Anton sat there, and we just had a conversation, and I kind of fell in love with them and the project and the idea of it. And it just kind of went from there. And everyone that I met, I really thought was incredible. And I've known the OCMA program, as long as I can remember, having been at the Berkeley Art Museum. And there's a really nice, also non-coincidence, but great synergy, which is, and it's not, public, but I think it will come out probably at some point, which is at the Aspen Art Museum, the 3 finalists for our project were Shigeru Ban, Tom Main, and Gigon and Geyer. Of course, here, that was 2008. The 2 finalists were Tom Main and Shigeru Ban.
Exactly.
So it's pretty exciting to have gotten to work with Shigeru Ban and build the Aspen Art Museum, and then to come here and work with Tom Main and finish this project. So so Tom and Brandon were excited when I came here too, because we knew each other peripherally from the Aspen project. So there are 100 reasons why I wanted to come here, but those are just a couple of them.
It was a symphony of synchronicities.
Yes.
Look at that.
There you go.
So great. So I love, I've got questions from all our wonderful visionaries here. A couple we've already kind of already looked at, but one that came to the forefront and that I think is very relevant to us as visionaries is that when our Visionaries group was founded, we were really founded to support and build a new museum. And here we are. Okay, it's taken us a long time to get here, but we're super excited to be here. And with this exceptional new, what will be an incredibly iconic building, important really building by Tom Main here, beautiful new permanent home for us. And so in terms of our mission statement of what we've had in the past and where we're going in the future, do you plan to keep our current mission statement? Are we going to be kind of California centric, or are we going to be national, international? What do you see for us moving forward? Well, with this new space?
Yes. So the vision that I articulated to the search committee in coming here, the idea is to look back to move forward. So I was really drawn to the idea that the museum was founded by 13 women, that I love the Visionaries. I love this idea of the female artists that are in the collection. I love this kind of philosophy and support. And, I was on the Segerstrom Center for the Arts related companies call, and their new chairwoman is their first chairwoman. And so Jane is coming in that role. So, I think there's always been a time for women. And, we were talking about the Ninth Street women and different points in time when the female voice has been more marginalized and when it's been louder. And it's just exciting. So in terms of how that will manifest, one of the opening shows, so you guys get excited for this preview. Okay. So one of the opening shows from our collection will be called 13 Women. And it will be 13 women from our collection, and it will evolve over the course probably of a year, where different women, works by different women will come in and out. And this is super breaking news. I don't even think anyone in the room knows this, but
we're excited. I'm already excited just thinking about it. It's so exciting.
Right. And I'm working on what I hope will be our first acquisition purchase in 5 years, which will be a work by a Southern California artist, which will be installed in our current temporary location and then be included in our opening exhibition. So we're really starting to lay the groundwork for what will be the opening. And
Oh, I like that.
so also secret, but we're going to bring back the California Biennial.
Oh, that, and that's such an important part of our history from
Yes.
when we were at the Newport Harbor Art Museum,
Yes.
is to have this California Biennial, because I think it can really showcase so many important artists now. And I know on worldwide,
Yes.
When you look at the world overall, you have so many important artists working in LA now. I mean, a
Absolutely.
huge basis.
Yep.
My dad, who likes to travel the world, would argue that the most important art center now would be Berlin and LA.
Yeah.
That's what he says. And he knows, I mean, he travels a lot. So I think, but especially the LA part, we have such a rich, you have so much to mine there.
Yeah. And
There's so much.
I mean, I honestly think that Southern California has always been the capital of artistic production.
Oh yeah.
The best artists have always been in California and in the Southern California region, in particular, Northern California also. But to do the California Biennial again is an opportunity to bring works into the collection, to support our community, to broadcast and amplify the creativity of our area, globally. So
Yeah.
the answer to your question is like, yes, California, and yes, global as well.
Yeah.
We can do the yes and.
Well, I think it's really interesting what you're saying too about going to the Biennale, or to the Biennial. Sorry, I'm in Italy. Is that, starting in 1957, when the Ferris Gallery was here, and Henry Hopkins, Walter Hopps, and all those
Yes.
guys were doing, a lot of those really seminal artists are in our permanent collection.
Exactly.
So you can
Yeah.
really draw on that rich history that we have. And part of that is so important, is to be able to show this rich repository that we have in our permanent collection and build on it.
Exactly.
Right. So,
Exactly.
and I also think, apropos, of course, is women and going global,
Yeah.
because it is such a global world today. And I think having this important building here will bring people here. They will come to LA, and they will come to Orange County. They will
Yeah.
come down here.
And I mean,
see
I
us.
used to come, and I mean, this was like a not to be missed destination, art destination, and that's what we will be
Yeah.
again.
And really, again, we've talked about, as we've been building the museum here, completing the Segerstrom Center for the Arts.
Yes.
This is the final piece. To have this entire art community here is really exceptional. So
Yeah, and Casey, Reitz and I have been talking, and I just saw like the cutout that I think is almost there already, where the buses will pull up, 3 in a row can fit. And we'll be doing full day arts curriculum for students, visual and performing arts. And there really is nowhere else in the world that you can do that. The kids can have lunch on the plaza and move between the different spaces and experience theater and orchestra and choral and visual arts. And it's just, I think that vision was so revolutionary, and it's great to be able to be putting the final piece in place.
yeah, I love that completion of the puzzle piece, because I know for me personally, and I was talking to one of my best friends in London the other day, who grew up in New York, and she was saying, I remember my grandmother taking me to the Met to see King Tut. And I said, I remember going up to LA County to LACMA as a girl in like 5th grade or something to go see King Tut. I think it was here around 1976. Is that right? Do you remember seeing it? Yeah, it was really transformational. And so one of the most important things to me is really bringing children in.
Yes.
Because again, it's not the transcendence, but the transformational power of art, especially working with children and getting all those people, especially we have so much relevance here in Costa Mesa and Santa Ana, to bring in school children here. A lot of times it's their first experience with art, and we really have a chance to give them that broad exposure across all the art modalities.
Yes, and for us, the visual arts it's not just painting, sculpture, photography, it's also fashion and design, and to have, a diversity of art experiences that people can have here.
Yeah.
And so that, because contemporary art can be, weird or scary for people sometimes. So, we definitely want to have, we want to reflect our time, and we also want people to feel comfortable here.
Yeah. One thing that I think is interesting, especially about contemporary art, and we kind of have a focus on that in the museum and with the Visionaries, is that, and I actually, when I wrote my master's thesis on Marcia Weisman, she said that she and Fred Weisman had, in the early 1960s, had to open their eyes to go to contemporary art. And I love that idea because I really think what's so engaging about this group in particular is that we look at things that are challenging. And the museum brings that challenge to us because especially contemporary art can be challenging.
Yes.
I mean, you go and see, let's say, the Impressionists. That's easy art to understand. You get it, it's beautiful. But so much of art challenges us here. And so what, in terms of your programming, besides a little preview that you gave us there, do you envision seeing? Like, multidisciplinary things for us? Or what do you have in mind?
So, I mean, I think the idea is about contemporary art and access is to really empower people to have an opinion, you know, and again, not everyone needs to like everything, you know, like we don't all like everyone, right? Like there's certain people that we're drawn to because we have similar interests, or other people that, you know, remind us of someone that we used to know, or, you know, so I like to make those kind of comparisons with art too, and to really empower people to say, like, you know, it's okay if you don't like this, as long as you've kind of come with an open mind, right? Yeah. And we came up with a phrase in Aspen, which I think makes sense here too, which is, you know, if you don't like what you see, come back again, right? Because next time it'll be different. There'll be something else on view. There'll be different works from the collection. There'll be different special exhibitions, and we build together a vocabulary and a language. And I think when you let people know that it's okay, like, to not get it, right?
Yeah.
Or to not
It's
like
safe.
it, you know. I mean, it just is, right? Things just are what they are, and to have a dialogue, and I mean, I've done exhibitions. I've spent, you know, years working on books or exhibitions with artists because I don't understand what it is they're trying to do, and so that I'm curious about that. And I think that curiosity is actually the defining character of a good society. I think when people are curious about things, then we have innovation, we have progress, you know, we move forward. And I think when people are not curious, then that's when things become concerning. And so art can fill that role. They can, objects can make people, you know, not understand something, but yet be curious about it. Well, why did they make that? Or what does that mean? Or what does it mean to me? Or what does it mean to you? Let's have a conversation about it. What can I learn from you and about you as we look together at a work of art?
Right. You see kind of reflected in their work, their sensibility, their point of view, how it's different from yours, or the same or similar. I think those are, I like the challenge of looking at contemporary art because it does challenge you. It kind of, you know, asks you to look a little deeper, or, you know, see how you connect to it. So,
and I like to say that all works of art are actually self-portraits. So they're self-portraits of the artist, even if they don't, you know, they're not figurative or anything like that. But the way that people interact with a work of art is also like a self-portrait, you know, because when we look at work, it's like a mirror to us and to our soul. So, you know, what do we learn about ourselves, and what do other people learn about us through interacting with art in that way?
I so agree, because when I find a work of art that really resonates, it is like a self-portrait, because there's something within you that resonates with that work of art that pulls at you, and you see again the truth in the art, right? There's something that you connect to,
and you see yourself.
And especially, you see yourself is reflected in that. Somehow you have like a heart connection with it. And
you feel seen, and, you know,
there's an understanding, like
exactly.
a different layer, a level of understanding, a depth.
I think so too. You know, I did a podcast with an artist named Adam Pendleton a few weeks ago, and we talked about, so when I write, I often put a single song on and just like play it over and over and over again. And I mean, it's a little cheesy, but oftentimes my go-to is Journey's Don't Stop Believing.
Don't Stop Believing. Because, okay, I like that.
You know, it just, you know, it's encouraging, right? But I at a certain point don't hear it anymore. You know, it just becomes almost like
a mantra,
or a meditation, or it's hypnotic. And so he and I were talking about this idea of, you know, when we're drawn to reading the same book again, or listening to the same song again, or the same work of art, you know, why is that? And And we talked about the fact that it's somehow because you feel like it sees you, it knows you. And I often say, I think that's all we want in the whole world, is to be seen and heard and understood.
Yeah. And loved, to take from you for the be do have. So.
Yes, exactly.
And interesting. So we have you, we're so excited, and we have a wonderful, wonderful curator of our collections, Cassandra. And I think she's going to stay with us, which I know will be very good news to the Visionaries. When do you envision getting a new chief curator in place?
So we are
looking?
There are a lot of things that I am doing simultaneously, and I may have said this to you. I'm trying to be both like systematic and organic in the way that I am approaching everything. And one of the things that I haven't really worked on yet at all is our staffing. We are definitely very understaffed.
We are
to run a building like this, and so one of the things that we'll do is to staff up. And I think one of the great histories of this institution is the director chief curator role. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to. And I think that we will have someone in place probably when we open.
Okay.
And we'll see the timeline. But one of the things that I have made a commitment to, and I'm pushing everyone on, is to set our opening date within. So my first 100 days, on the 100th day, which I asked someone yesterday, do you guys know what day it is?
What day are we on?
No, only work days, only 100 work days, but we'll email it to everyone as a follow-up to this. But on my 100th day, we'll announce the day of our grand opening. And then we'll work backwards from there with our gala and with our exhibitions and with our staffing plan and all these things. But the primary focus right now is to be able to set that day and then fill in from there. So
very good.
But talking about chief curators here, I am tomorrow afternoon going to see Paul Schimmel.
Oh, we love Paul Schimmel.
Yes, going to his house and chatting with him about some ideas that I have. And he is very supportive of me being here and the finishing of the building and this kind of crowning achievement for Orange County. So.
Well, I think what's so great about your experience and being an art historian yourself is that you have curated over 200 exhibitions yourself. Yes. So we do have a tremendously rich, you have a tremendously rich history to draw upon to kind of work with the opening programming as well. So I like that you're saying, a year from now or so, we'll have a chief curator in place. But now as you're planning everything, that means that we get your wonderful and great depth of expertise in terms of our exhibitions that we can have, especially for the opening. So you'll be working on them with here, and definitely do need to staff up a bit since we have a tiny, what's our staff here?
Oh, you don't even say it. 5.
We have like 5 people. I mean they do, I have to say,
very dedicated team,
exceptionally dedicated team. I mean, we couldn't do it without this amazing team we have, and we're so grateful. They always support us Visionaries, even if we're a little demanding that we need things, even when we have technical challenges. Poor Shaman, working so hard with technical challenges that we might have here and there, but small staff. So how numerous will our staff be when we open, do you think?
Don't have a number in mind, but it's one of the things that Sarah and I are working on is what the appropriate budget is for the building when we open. And that was one of the things that I looked at in the search process, was that projection. And luckily I have the experience of having built and opened a new museum recently. And so I know areas that cost more than you think they will, and opportunities for raising money that hadn't been identified before. And so Sarah and I had a meeting about that yesterday, and we'll make sure that we're right sized.
I'm sure you will. One thing that I loved in reading all of the background information about you, especially is that in Aspen you were able to raise $130 million, which is so impressive. So to not only complete the building, but also to create an endowment.
Yes.
And I know we have some endowment here.
Yes.
And I know we also have some funds available for our collection for
Yes.
expanding that. So I'm sure you'll have an eye to that as well.
Yeah.
Because we're building this museum and we want to sustain it for the long term.
Yeah. And
Really
actually,
important.
I was working on that. Kelsey Nimiroff, who you guys may or may not have yet met, came with me from Aspen. And I was working on some materials today and looking at like the nomenclature around the campaign. And it has previously said capital campaign. And today I added with a little, carrot and endowment.
Exactly.
So it's the capital and endowment campaign. Yeah. And yes, for sure.
It's so important for our long-term programs and just, for long-term sustainability of something so major and our crown jewel here.
Yeah.
So I love that. One thing I also love, I showed you those books that Heidi's written, and I saw that do you have a third one coming out?
Yes, in October.
In October. Okay,
Yes.
So another Conversations with Artists.
Yes.
I have volumes 1 and 2, and I had to confess that I didn't know a lot of the artists. So I've been busy looking up all the artists. Some I knew and I recognized, some I knew, but there were a lot that I didn't know. And because they're global. Yeah. Some are Californian, I had more of a clue. Some were British and I knew some, but others I didn't know at all. And I like that because I like this new vision. And I think for a new museum too, we have the ability to open up to different things. So will we have 30 new artists with the new book?
With volume 3. So volume 3 is interesting. So volume 1 is 34 conversations with 33 artists, because there was one where we did 2 together. And then the second one, I think, also has 32 or 33. But what's different about volume 3, and I've been working on it with my editor, is that the conversations are longer. And it's really very specific to this year. So there are some that predate the COVID period, but like one with an artist named Marlo Pasquale that I had done a project with in Aspen, and unfortunately she died this past year of cancer, and for whatever reason that wasn't included in an earlier volume, so I really wanted that included in this one. So that's kind of an outlier because it's much earlier, but almost everything else is from this year. So interestingly,
great. Very apropos.
Yeah.
To COVID, what we've gone through.
And 2 of the artists in volume 3 are actually in earlier volumes, and they're both California artists. So Doug Aiken and Mary Weatherford, and they're, much longer conversations. So there are, I think, 18, maybe 19. I may add one more. So 18 or 19 artists, conversations in volume 3, but they're much, much longer. So the book will be the same thickness and like the same design, but fewer conversations, more in depth, which is, I think, one of the things that happened this year is we have had more time to actually dig into these conversations.
Because COVID has really given us a time for reflection.
Exactly.
I mean, a much deeper reflection, because we've been kind of in jail for a year, but we're getting out of jail soon. As you know, we're getting our shots. Heidi's had COVID. I've had my first shot. So
we probably should have said that at the beginning.
We're feeling pretty safe here. So we hope you know that everyone else is wearing masks.
Yes.
So we're good.
And they're more than 6 feet from us.
Yeah, So we're feeling pretty safe here. So want you to know that. So let's see. So you will continue your book series because I noticed when I was reading the books that you took them from curating shows at Berkeley, at Aspen, et cetera. So, because it gives you opportunities to have, podcasts or whatever with artists, these conversations. So that will continue here.
Yes.
I love that. And your podcast as well.
Yep. I mean, so far so good. Yeah, every Tuesday. And they're, it's interesting because the woman who's the guest on my podcast this week is her name is Sarah Sutton. And she is the principal at an organization called Sustainable Museums. And they just partnered with the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation to give away $5 million for museums to be sustainable. And I spoke to her the day
applying?
We are. Yes, good. Exactly.
I love it.
So I did the conversation with her the Sunday before I started on Monday. And then I had, so I talked about how it was starting and how we had these photovoltaics that, we wanted to do. And So yes, Sarah joined the workshop, and we will be applying for a grant. So, there's synergy between all of these different things, and opportunities to, have conversations with the people that benefit the museum, and vice versa.
Another beautiful synchronicity, because we know there's no such thing as coincidence, right?
Exactly.
And is our new building LEED certified, I assume, or how's that working?
I think it is. I mean, so Sarah and I talked about that, and what's interesting is that Shigeru Ban, for example, was not an advocate for LEED, so the Aspen Art Museum building exceeds LEED Platinum standards, but he didn't want that designation, and I haven't actually had that conversation with Tom to ask about that, but the building is incredibly sustainable and mindful of that. So I don't know whether we'll actually have that sticker or not, but we definitely are creating a sustainable museum.
That's really great news. I know I know we're going to have a lot more hard hat tours with all of our visionaries. Yes. We're looking forward to welcoming you here to have hard hat tours, and of course meet Heidi in person. But I noticed when we came into this building, the museum tower next door, it's a Pele build. This building's by Cesar Pele, and it is a LEED certified building. And I know that Anton was saying that the museum, and Tom Main and Brandon were saying that the building is incredibly efficient, and not only beautifully designed, but everything from the shell of the building, from the tiles, the what's the kind of tiles there? Sorry, the terracotta tiles. Yeah, sorry, the white terracotta tiles are very sensitive, nature sensitive.
Yes.
And so that's exciting to have that.
Yeah, and I mean, the landscaping is also incredibly beautiful, and we'll be like creating a park basically above the galleries, and that's really important in terms of water, and the landscape is very indigenous and also representative of the climate that we're in, and so it's just mindful. The building's very mindful in its approach to everything.
I like that. I see on the maquette over there, there's a row of trees too, so it probably provides some shade too.
Yeah, well, and those are actually lifted up, which is so beautiful. This idea of kind of like a streetscape that's elevated, and then the art is safe underneath.
Oh, I love that. So many cool things to look forward to. So, this was a good question. Is that when we open our building, when we open the new museum next spring, or around June is what we're thinking. How do you plan?
By the way, Alison said that. I did not say that.
Okay.
So remember on 100th day.
Okay. So. Right. Don't listen to me, because
definitely listen to Alison. But on that
note, I'm going to defer to Heidi on that right away. I don't really know. I really don't know. I know I've only heard whispers of timings for things, and I don't think does anyone know definitively? I don't think we know definitively. And we have had delays because of COVID, et cetera, and manufacturing things, et cetera. But hopefully by next summer, I feel like I can.
It's going to be amazing when it happens.
It's going to be nothing but fabulous. nothing but fabulous. But one thing, a couple things that are interesting. So, what are your plans in terms of engaging our community, the Orange County community? So we really came from kind of a Newport Beach centric museum. Now we're in a much more county location here in Costa Mesa / Santa Ana. How do you plan to engage the Orange County community, and then our greater California community and the greater global community?
Absolutely. So I think there's no question this building's incredibly iconic. I think it's going to be a magnet for people from our county, from our region, from our state, from our nation, frankly, from the globe. And I think that there's also no question that we are clearly the center for and the anchor for all visual arts in Orange County.
For sure.
I mean, we can just claim that. And I put that in some of our literature today. Like, that's just, we're marking that spot.
Yes, we are.
So when we do set the opening date, I mentioned this a couple of times, but I'm going to keep saying it because I'm sure that people are like, what, did she actually say that? But our public opening will be a 24-hour opening.
Ooh.
And every hour or every other hour, we will have programming. So for example, I'm going to ask Elizabeth Armstrong, who I'm having lunch with next week, to come and give a walkthrough of one of the open exhibitions. We'll ask the chorale to do a choral performance. We'll, partner with the orchestra and with the repertory theater and ask people to celebrate the opening of our building, but this incredible cultural moment, for not just our county, but our region and the state. And the goal is just to make everyone feel welcome. And there are a lot of different strategies for that, and some of the things that we're exploring. But it's important to me that we remove the barriers of entry, whatever those are, whether they're financial or philosophical or practical. I want people to be able to park, and I want people to be able to eat here, and I want people to be able to stay for as long as they want. So we need shade when it's sunny, and all of these different things. It's important to cater to people's creature comfort so that they can be intellectually and spiritually open to the experiences of art that we are sharing.
I love that. And did you do this at Aspen as well?
We did a 24-hour opening in Aspen too.
Awesome.
Yep. And we did sunrise yoga, which we'll do here
Okay,
too.
I'm in.
And we had programs for insomniacs. So, we showed movies in the middle of the night, and we'll do all of that. So it was really fun.
And did you have programming for children as well?
Always. Yeah. I mean, I'm a
love
mom.
that. That's like, I know, I am too. So the programming for kids is super important to me personally.
And it's interesting because so I've always, and my kids are teenagers now, but when they were little and we were designing the summer camps, I would bring the camps home, the descriptions of the camps, and before they could read, I would read them to them, and they would say like, well, that's boring, or that sounds fun, or my son wanted an architecture camp, or my daughter wanted a camp where they could make things for their horses, and those were always the most popular camps. And oftentimes museums, I think, make a mistake that they don't actually ask the audience that they're trying to serve what it is they want. We had an incredibly successful program in Aspen with the outreach to the Spanish-speaking community. And I speak Spanish, and our director of education there spoke Spanish, and we went on the local Spanish language radio station, La Tricolore, and in Spanish invited the community to come to the museum. Instead of saying like, hey, we're showing an artist from Mexico, like, we think you'd like it. Instead it was like, what would you like? People wanted transportation and music and food. So we would do tours of the exhibitions in Spanish, and then we would do some kind of community gathering up on the roof. And, so that's what we'll do here. I haven't been here long enough, but one of my personal interests is with veterans. I am so grateful for people who have served our country. And this is an area of the country where there, is a lot of active and former military. And that's one of the communities that, I asked if we're currently serving, and I don't know that we are, but, that's something that, is a big priority for me.
I love that you're saying that, because again, it's inclusiveness and the possibility of healing, especially with veterans. I think that is so important. I don't know if I shared with you that I wrote on Marcia Simon Weisman, and Marcia Weisman, who I wrote my thesis on, her brother was Norton Simon, her husband was Fred Weisman, although she was really the one with the great eye for art. But she first put art in hospitals and put the art in Cedars-Sinai. And then MoCA was actually her brainchild. And the healing qualities of art are so important for our veterans. And also, I think, again, the transformative for children. That's why I'm so, my mom was a teacher. She taught first graders. And I just think that art, and we have a huge Hispanic community here, especially very locally here. And I think, almost 50% of Spanish speaking in California, right? So I think it's a really important audience for us. And to have programs in Spanish and in English, I think it's essential. We actually also have some different cultural communities in within Orange County. I live in San Clemente, and so we're right next to Camp Pendleton. So we have a lot of, military down there. And there's a lot of programs that work with those, but I don't know about them. And we may well have done that, but I think that would be an interesting thing to kind of look at veterans and how can we serve those communities, because, these people are invaluable to us.
Yeah. And we
truly.
we did, because this is a, personal interest of mine, we did some programs in Aspen where we would do programs specifically focused on veterans and first responders and the people that they love. And we would incorporate some mindfulness practices and tours of the exhibitions. And then I like to feed everyone. I love the idea of people coming together after an art experience over food and to have conversation. Because that's how the art experience really gets cemented, where it's like you can come and look at something and then, get in your car and then, someone cuts you off and, or something happens, right? And then like that experience goes away. But if you have an art experience and then you sit and have, a meal together or, a snack or whatnot, then, it has an ability to settle more and then it stays and then it has greater impact. So I love things like that too.
The Visionaries, you'll be happy to know, are foodies. And
Okay,
so when
good.
we go see great art, we always go have a great meal. And really, because that opens up for conversation,
Yes.
because we sit there and we talk about it and we talk about what did we like and very much we enjoy the meal. A lot of times we even have these meals where we'll go kind of communal and we'll pass things.
Love
and
that.
so
Yeah.
that experience it's a familial experience.
Exactly.
And I think that really does bring it in because we start going, and again, art is that great connector,
Yes.
connecting vehicle, I think
Yeah.
is so important. So let's see. We've gotten through so many of these great things here. Let's see. I'm gonna have to get my glasses on. Excuse me 1 minute. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one. Do you have plans to create a couples collectors group for people over 40? I know a lot of people.
That's very
We
specific.
have visionaries. I don't know why they have to be over 40. They can really be couples of any age, but yeah, couples group. A lot of people have been asking for a couples group.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, we're looking at membership opportunities, across the institution. And I think travel is really key. It's a great question to follow up on the last question, which is, how do you build community? And how do you build community around art? And how do you build community around art in our museum?
Right.
And I think a big part of that is shared experience. And travel is one of the best ways to do that. And I know that people often do, they like to travel with their friends and they also like to travel with their partners. And so, that's something that I have heard a bunch, and we did do some pretty great trips, from Aspen. And one of the things that we tried to do was to go places where people wouldn't go on their own. So, we went to China before anyone was interested in going. Not that they weren't interested in going, they were all interested in going, but they didn't have access or the experience to go there on their own. So they wanted to go with a group. Or we went to Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Qatar and Sharjah. And
I don't even know where Qatar and Sharjah are.
I know, right?
Someone
So
do.
they're part of the UAE, the United
The
Arab
UAE. Okay,
Emirates.
I do know where that is.
And Qatar is not part of the UAE, but it could have been, but it's very close. But anyway, we went there, and
Wow.
that trip, long waiting list for it because it was not a place that people would have gone on their own, but they
Right.
loved going with their friends. Or we went to Cuba early, or just places that that people are curious about, but it's maybe more fun to go with a group. So
Yeah, well, visionaries are inveterate travelers. All of us love to travel. It's really part of it because it's such a fun shared experience. And we've been to Minneapolis. I've only been on a couple trips. We've been to Denver. I had gone, they went recently to Cuba. I had already been to Cuba, so I didn't go on that trip, but I know we had wanted to go. One of our trips that we had planned was to go to Paris to see Christo wrap the Arc de Triomphe, of course. And sadly, we lost Christo, COVID, and then we lost Christo. So, but I'm sure, hopefully you have other things in mind. Did you also go to, say, or do any trips to Art Miami Basel or to FIAC or the Biennale or Art Basel?
Yeah, so we did some trips to art fairs kind of early on, and when we went to Dubai, we did go at the time of Art Dubai, so we spent like kind of an afternoon there. So sometimes we would use an art fair as like an anchor destination, and then build a trip around that. And one of the popular trips that we did was every 10 years, the Venice Biennale, Sculpture Project Munster, and Documenta happen at the same time.
Yes.
So we did that twice, 10 years apart, and we called that the mother of all art trips.
Okay.
And then the mother of all art trips too. So, and then anyone who came on the trip both times, we made these baseball caps with like the Roman numeral 2, and gave those out to anyone that came twice, 10 years apart. But
I love it.
so
I like anything clever like that. So it's okay, great. So we're just wrapping up here, but let's see. Let me see if I've missed any.
And by the way, as Alison is looking, this is the first of many conversations that we will all get to have together, and not as easy to be interactive over Zoom, but hopefully engaging, because at least we're together, and looking forward to when we can all be together also.
Right. Well, I'm going to end on I'm going to ask a question on my own since I've been reading. So one thing that or one question I'd say, are you artistic?
I would say no.
Okay.
Definitely not. And it's funny because I always say that, and people say like, how can you say that? Like, curating exhibitions is artistic, or you write and that's artistic. But I don't think of myself in that way. I always say I have like no talent. But I have style, or I have different things like that. But I can't make anything. And I don't know if I was talking with you about that, but oh no, I was talking about it with someone else. But I said, much to my kids, particularly my daughter's like great chagrin, I am not crafty, and there's all this pressure when you're my kid, right? That like you come to school with like your projects, and they're like, well, your mom's in art, like yours should look amazing. And my kids are like, she's not good at crafts, so.
I have to laugh about that because when my kids were in school, I would always say, as you can see, my child has done their own project.
Right,
I have already graduated from graduate school. I can do the project and get the A. This is their project, because the parents would do the projects for the kids.
I know.
And I'm like, I've already done this. This is the child's project.
Believe me,
They're
I would
learning.
help if I could, but
It's not your strong suit.
No.
I don't know if I'm particularly crafty, although I did do the roses for the Rose River
Nice.
Memorial. I'm super excited about that. But one thing, if you're not artistic, then you have really an exceptional sensitivity to listening to artists and to writing about them. Because when I was reading what you had to say, you talked about being, doing, and having. Be art, do art, have art. Be love, do love, have love. I would even say share love, share art. So when you think about it, your sensitivity really comes through in that way. And I think in terms of being a curator, that sensitivity, and I, by the way, would probably say the same thing about myself. People ask me, are you an artist? In fact, the 5th grade teacher recruited me to do the art boards every week for a year. She's like, well, you're an artist. I go, no, I'm an art historian. Like I have no craft talent anyways, but I did do them for a year. Not well, but I did manage to get up the 5th grade historical figure projects every week. But this sensitivity really to looking at artists is really a gift, such a gift as well, and this curatorial background. So it lets you see the insides. So at least it's that appreciation that translates into, and that openness and that willingness to see. So, I really liked that idea of be, do, have, and how you, because I really think that that's what it is for the Visionaries. We are being curious about art. We are doing in terms of getting out and seeing, and then we are able to have this conversation and the shared love of art, really. So it's been exceptional that way.
It is an incredible privilege to spend a life around art and with artists. And someone asked me the other day, I think it's for a local magazine, what I want my legacy to be. And I said, it's as an advocate for artists and as a proselytizer for art, and maybe I was a little more modest in the past about why I think art matters, and maybe was more willing to kind of take a back seat and let people kind of find their way to it. But now I'm pretty much straight up proselytizing about why art matters, and how it makes life better, and how it's essential to the good society, and how I think it's a basic human right rather than privilege. And but for me personally, it is an incredible privilege, to be able to spend my time and my whole life around artists and artworks and people.
I just want.
I know what you're saying. That's one thing I've ever.
You're muted, unfortunately.
I'm so sorry. We had to mute everyone else. We had a few stray talkers there. So I just really wanted to thank Heidi on behalf of the Visionaries for coming to our museum. We want to welcome you with really open arms and know that we are super passionate about art. We're passionate about contemporary art. We're passionate about our community and especially about our new building. We're proud. You and I spoke for a moment about being women, and I think it's important that our voices are heard. And especially for this exceptional group of women, we want to welcome you. This is our vision. We are visionaries, and we're glad to have a visionary leader to lead the way. So thank you so much for this first talk. And we're just also grateful. Thank you everyone for submitting questions. Sorry for our technical difficulties. We tried to handle it as gracefully as possible. It was slightly stressful, but we tried to get right through it. And I think we had a good conversation. So
Absolutely.
thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
I appreciate your time and your
Thank
attention. And more than anything, we appreciate your incredible support of our institution. It is ours, and we will be very, very pleased when we can welcome you in person to what you see behind us. So enjoy your evening, everyone.
Thank you.
So.